welcome to the Adoption Lounge. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Katie. Thank you so much for joining us. We are actually really excited because we have another one of our families who is going to tell his adoption story today. So we get to hear all about that. One of our lifelong families.
Yes, we're super excited. His name is Adam, and he adopted with Lifelong a few years ago, Ronan. Right? Did I say that right? Ronan?
Ronan is his brother, but he's still a part of our story too.
Oh,
Yes.
good memory.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about why you started to work Lifelong?
We decided to work with Lifelong because we knew ever since Kevin and I met my husband Kevin, unfortunately, who can't be here right now, we always knew that we wanted to be an adoptive family. That was definitely going to be part of our journey. And it was just kind of finding the right fit. We looked at a bunch of different agencies, facilitators. We thought about foster care, but Lifelong really is what aligned with us and our goals. And just after speaking with I don't think he's there anymore, but one of the representatives at the time who was also an adoptive parent and had, I believe, adopted through Lifelong. And so we just felt really comfortable and aligned with Lifelong from that moment. The journey wasn't always easy, but it was definitely worth it. But yeah, we're excited. We're happy to be a Lifelong family. Very proud of it.
Aw. So in the beginning, what were you kind of the most anxious about when you first got started?
The thing I was most anxious about was the home study
Yeah.
because I mean it was really just so daunting. I mean, you've got someone dissecting your lives, and you're like worried. Oh, okay, well, are we going to be approved? Like, I mean, and it was like a months long process, especially for us in California. And we ended up really hitting it off with our social worker who did our home study. And it really wasn't as daunting as I thought that it was going to be. I think the bigger part of it was where we had extended family living with us at the time. So it was not just me and my husband, but it was also a good friend of ours who was staying with us for the time being, and both of Kevin's parents. And so like everybody had to get the background check. Everyone had to get their fingerprints. Everybody had to do everything. So it was a big process, but that was the thing that had me most anxious, but it really wasn't anything to be too worried about in the end.
Yeah, good. I actually hear that from a lot of families. I think going in, it almost makes me feel like I'm running for office, like a politician or something, and they're going to do a bunch of background checks, and I'm like, I haven't done anything, but like maybe I forgot. I'm going to get in trouble. But yeah, so when you first got started, what do you think the most surprising thing was? Like, was there something you weren't really expecting, like discussing, your preferences with your husband or creating your profile?
The thing that was most surprising is like really just what can connect with birth parents sometimes. I think Amanda and I
Oh,
talked
yeah.
about this several times, and there were several different examples of like what stands out in the profile that makes somebody think that you're a match for them. And I think there was a story about a turtle you told me once, Amanda.
Yes.
Loves the turtle story.
That's my favorite story.
Yes.
I have a Dalmatian story that's very similar. It's
And
all
and you
different
know,
turtles.
we had a neighbor of ours at the time who they were also adoptive parents, and they told me about why they got picked. And the birth family picked them because my neighbor had red hair and she had red hair, and she didn't know that
Aw.
Megan was not a natural redhead. I mean, it was definitely a bottle job, but that's why she got picked. And that was the thing that I thought was like the most interesting. Like, you can try to be as perfect as you want to be on paper, but that's not always going to be the thing that resonates with somebody. It's going to
It's
be
so true.
some quirky detail that just, facilitates a connection.
We had a family one time get chosen because they said their favorite movie was Inside Out. And so whenever I'm talking to a
Mm.
family about this, I'm always like, it's never going to be the thing you think that you put on your profile. Like, that's not going to be what gets you chosen. It's going to be something you did not even think about at all.
So the funny thing is, what got us chosen is something that I
Yeah.
really teased Kevin about when we were filling out our profile, because I think one of the questions that ended up going on there was like, "What is your dream vacation?"
I told this
And
story before.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and Kevin put a Lord of the Rings cruise around New Zealand, and I'm like, "Oh my God, you're
That
such a
sounds
dork!"
amazing.
It does sound amazing. I mean, I totally do it, but I teased him
I feel
about it
like we need
because
to
he's
be
a big Lord of
supportive
the.
of Kevin and his Lord of the Rings dreams, but okay.
But we got picked because our birth mom's best friend was a huge Lord of the Rings fan. And she's like, oh, well, he likes Lord of the Rings.
Best friends
They
are.
like Lord of the Rings. Then you know what? They've got to be good people.
It's
I
true.
mean, it really turned out to be true. It's like, it wasn't our house. It wasn't like these perfect pictures that we arranged a photographer for. It ended up being the one thing that I teased Kevin about. So now he teases me.
I was gonna say I would bring that up forever.
And he does.
That's
I love
hilarious.
that. So why don't you take us through your journey a little bit? Talk about opportunities that you had, feelings that you had. Tell us it all.
Oh, oh, it was such an emotional roller coaster, and you were there for a lot of it, Amanda. And you know, I'm still ever so grateful for you for being as gracious as you were, because I mean, I was having some like I've got a Taryn is 4 years old right now, and he has some epic meltdowns, and I think I had a toddler level meltdown or two with you, Amanda. Um, the waiting can be so hard and so emotional, because you think immediately going into this, oh, well, we're going to get picked because we think that we're great. And again, going back to our previous discussion a couple of minutes ago, that's not always what gets you picked. And so we were so frustrated sometimes by the waiting, and why are people looking at our profiles but nobody's picking us. We had, I think it was two potential matches before this ended up happening, before we finally were matched with Marty and Taryn, who would become our son. But the first one, I think, was the hardest. It was out of Florida, and it drug on for like 3 weeks, that this birth family was trying to choose between us and another family. And it came down to they wanted to meet with us over Zoom. And so we got excited. We got ready. We were waiting for the call. And 10 minutes before the call, I think the person from that agency in Florida called and said she picked the other family before that she'd even met us. Which, you know what? That's fine. That's great. I'm happy for that other family. But it was just it was heartbreaking in that moment, because, like, well, you didn't even give us a chance. And why drag it out for 3 weeks? Because that's how long it took.
Yeah.
And there was another opportunity, I think, actually, that came before that, but it was very early in the pregnancy, and she ended up ghosting both Lifelong and us. So, I mean, I don't know what happened, but I'm so grateful for those missed opportunities, really and truly. And that's what I think that a lot of people really need to understand about the waiting. Yeah, the waiting sucks, but it's definitely one of those meant to be things, because, like, I cannot imagine any other child but Taryn. I can't imagine any other child but our child. Like, if any of those other opportunities had worked out, I wouldn't have this amazing little boy that I have right now. So it was totally worth it, worth every ounce of frustration and uh, meltdown that I had. But yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Those are passionate conversations. That's what my friends tell me. Passionate conversation.
Well, it's an emotional
Very
journey,
passionate.
and it's nice to have a coordinator and to be able to get out those frustrations, because there's not really a ton of other people you can talk to that are close in your circle,
Mhm.
during adoption. But talk about meeting your what ended up being your birth mom for the first time.
Oh my God, she ended up being so great, and I am really grateful that we've been able to maintain a relationship with her. So we met for the first time. We were talking a couple of times on the phone, and I remember her calling us like a week before. She's like, "I'm ready to give birth right now. I'm done. She's like, I don't like being pregnant. Well, I'm gonna go to the doctor. I'm gonna see if I can get induced." I'm like, "Well, don't do that. Listen to the doctor if they tell you to wait." And she's like, "Well, I'm gonna go walk around. I'm gonna go walk around this lake that was nearby. I heard that walking can kind of get things started." Like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. I've been told that. But we ended up getting a call from her, and she's like, okay. A few days later, she's like, okay, I've talked to the doctor. They're good to induce. She's like, I need you guys to get in the car and just go ahead and come up. And we had a go bag packed for like just 3 weeks, sitting by the front door, so that when it was time, it was time. And we drove. It was like 7 hours, which I guess really isn't all that bad. I know some people fly across the country. We drove 7 hours. We got there at about 9 o'clock at night, and we walked into her hospital room, and we just instantly connected. We sat there for quite a while talking until she was ready to push. And what was interesting is what came after. It was after Taryn was born. She talked to us and she's like, I had every intention of coming here and leaving the hospital. She's like, I didn't want to see you guys. I didn't want to see the baby afterwards. She's like, but you guys just felt like family, and you were just so loving, and we had such a connection. She's like, that I couldn't do that. And ever since then, she has been a part of our life, and she's a part of our story. We're very lucky that she's been able to come out every couple of years. She was actually just here a couple of weeks ago, where she got to meet Ronan, who she is also the biological mom of, but via surrogacy. So that's how Ronan really becomes a part of our story with her. But she got to see Taryn again, and just it's not just beneficial for us, but it's really beneficial for her, and most of all for our son, because he gets to know that he is always loved. He is loved, but just by a lot more people, and that he gets to know where he comes from, and it doesn't feel like he loses a part of his identity. And that was what has always just been so important to us.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I was also adopted, and I think it's so important to have that information. A lot of people feel very nervous, about more open adoption situations. So I love hearing your intention behind it and how well it's gone. I just think that's so lovely, so healthy. So
And
good job, everybody.
well, thanks. Well, honestly, we didn't actually have the intention of it. We thought it would be, like semi-open, like it'd be communication here, there, a couple of times over the years, sending pictures, and
Is that kind of
it
what
was
she
kind of
communicated she wanted, or did it kind of
that was
morph?
what
Like,
we. I think that was what we mutually just kind of agreed from the beginning, that that's what would kind of like best fit. But just when we met, there was just such a connection, and I know that's not always possible for a variety of reasons, but we're just
sure.
very fortunate that that's how it worked out for us.
No, I think the fluidity is really important too, because I think a lot of people feel like it's so black and white and you make these decisions, but I
Oh, you
mean,
have to
things
keep an open
change.
mind. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, talk about how Ronan came about. That's an interesting story.
It is. It's one of my favorite stories. So it's actually, it kind of ties into the waiting for the adoption. So we waited, I think it was at the point where we finally got matched. I think we'd been waiting like 18 months. And I was just so over it. I'd had one of my passionate conversations with you, Amanda, and I told Kevin, I'm like, well, I think our contract's coming up. I don't really think that I want to renew it. I just don't have the emotional bandwidth to do this anymore. And so we had talked about surrogacy for a long time, and we decided, okay, well, we'll go ahead and take out a line of credit on our house. We'll go ahead and pursue surrogacy because it's really expensive. And that's what we started doing. So we met with an egg donor who we really liked, but then ended up being really flaky. The doctor couldn't get a hold of her to do like the retrieval. We then found another donor who the doctor said was really strong, but after they were very able to retrieve very, very few eggs. And I told Kevin, actually, I should backtrack a little bit. I told Kevin, I'm like, the second that we really, really get serious about surrogacy is when something's going to happen with adoption.
Of
I'm like,
course.
mark my words, that's what's
Oh,
going to happen.
yeah.
And I am not kidding. It was the day after we signed a contract with the egg donor that we got a call about Taryn. It was literally the day after. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're just going to be really busy. Or, I mean, we can keep these eggs and we can keep these eggs and embryos on ice. Let's just kind of like follow this two-prong approach. And while we were in the hospital after Taryn had been born, I got a call from the fertility clinic, and none of the fertilized eggs became embryos. It was just a complete bust. And I was so at peace with it at that moment. I'm like, I'm sitting here holding my child. That is all I wanted. I've got my little boy. I'm happy. You know what? I probably couldn't have taken us doing this back to back like that. So it was probably for the best. But we ended up, like I said, we had this really, really great relationship with our birth mom. And we had just, mentioned to her that we were trying to pursue surrogacy at the same time. And she was the one who offered. She's like, well, you know what? I'll be your donor.
Aw,
And and so she did. She hated every second of going through the egg. It's really invasive egg
it's
retrieval,
very
apparently.
invasive. Yeah.
And but she went through it, and we ended up we the fir we did a transfer one time, and it resulted in a loss. But then the next one took, and now we have Ronan. So Taryn and Ronan, even though they came to us in different ways, Taryn through adoption and Ronan through surrogacy, they're biologically related. So they've got that, kinship and that story.
It's such a
I
unique story.
just can't believe that it worked out the way that it did. And I'm sorry if I'm giving you word salads.
Oh no, it's such a
Salads.
unique story. Like, I just think that's so neat that they get to have that biological tie, and it just shows what a positive relationship you have with her. If she wanted to be that person, I just think that's really neat.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the struggles? Let's go back to that. What do you think the hardest part about your adoption was?
Are you talking about like the process of the adoption, like after matching, or prior to that? Because
Just
definitely the
like the
waiting
wait.
before that.
Yeah,
Oh
like
God,
the
the
wait.
waiting. Well, the waiting and like, but also trying to you hear Amanda, you always gave such great advice, but I mean, but it was advice I didn't want to hear at the time, and it was things I'm like, oh, that's a cliche. You're just blowing smoke. I don't believe you for a
I
second.
always tell people that. I'm like, you're not going to want to hear what I have to say. You're going to be like, shut up, Katie. But I
I'm
swear,
like, the
it's
right
real.
child is out there. I didn't want to hear it at the time, but it was absolutely true. But it really was the way, and just kind of trying to keep my own emotions in check. And I think after the the second failed match, I just became really, really guarded, and I'm just like, well, I'll believe it when we're at the hospital. I was just very, very jaded by that point. But like I said a couple of times before, the wait was worth it, but that was absolutely just the hardest, and just the emotional struggle of all. Like sometimes it gives you like a little bit of imposter syndrome or not feeling good enough. They're like, well, I'm like, there are many times I wanted to revisit our profile. Well, what can we change? What are we
Hmm.
doing wrong? What haven't we done right? Because there's got to be something wrong with us if at this point it's been like a year and a half and nothing's happened, and it just
Right.
wasn't the case. So giving ourselves some grace was also important.
Yeah. And any advice that you would give, because I think you give great advice. So, what advice would you give to other parents that are going through adoption or even thinking about adoption?
Approach it with an open mind. I think that's the most important, because what you want and what you expect are not necessarily what you're going to get and not how it's going to turn out. Like, we were not into the idea of an open adoption whatsoever in the beginning. We were like semi-open. That's about all we're comfortable with. But being able to have that open mind, and I think also honoring where your child comes from. Like, I think it's very important. And I know this isn't always possible, like I said, for a child to know their story, where they come from. I've been telling Taryn about his adoption since he was, before he even understood what I was saying. But just so that he could always have that narrative, because
Hmm.
I think that's incredibly important. So honor your child by letting them keep that part of their identity, but
Hmm.
also honor the birth parents, because that child wouldn't be there without them. You know what? It might not always be. You might not have the best relationship with them. It might have been strained, but ultimately they're the reason that you're a parent. So try not to talk bad about them, and I think that's it. Just keeping an open mind and honoring the birth parent and the child and their identity. Yeah.
That's great advice, Adam.
Good job. No, I totally agree. I think it's so important to make sure that you're honoring the birth parents. And also, I feel like if you want your child to grow up with a positive feeling about their adoption, there's just no need to be negative. Like, I really like what you said about not saying anything negative about them, because regardless of what happened, they still made a loving decision to stay pregnant, to have this baby, to choose for them to have a life that they feel they deserve outside of what they've personally felt capable of providing. And I just think it's so important to honor that. And then your child will always be able to feel positive about their adoption experience. And then we can learn the details as we get older, because those aren't omissions that are lies, they're just not necessary when you're forming the narrative.
So I actually want to kind of comment on that too. But be honest with your kids, because I
Mhm.
actually have very personal experience of not being honest about adoption. So I have a brother who I did not grow up with. He's a half brother. He was raised by his grandparents on his mother's side, but they raised him as if he were like, he thought his mother, he grew up thinking his mother was his sister, his grandparents were his parents.
There's so
So
Wow.
much of
because
that in familial adoption. I feel like when it's in the family, you're like, we have free reign to
You don't
lie.
have to tell
Yeah.
anybody.
But what's kind
That's
of
so
crazy
wild.
about it? What's crazy about it is, so he'd been, I guess, there had been CPS involved, like he'd been removed from his mother's care, and that's why his grandparents were taking care of him. But I was like a 6-year-old kid. I'm like, I want a brother, I want a sister. And my mom and dad told me, well, you actually have a brother, and they told me about him, and they showed me his picture. And so I kept this picture for a long time. I'm like, one day it was my dream. I wanted to meet my older brother because he was 2 years older than me. And what ended up being crazy, and this is why I think you always just need to be honest, because you never know what's going to happen. We ended up going to the same middle school. I was in sixth grade and he was in eighth. And I remember seeing him in the cafeteria one day, and I won't say his name. I'm like, "Are you so and so?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I'm your brother." And that's how he found out that he was
I
adopted.
knew
And his
Oh
exactly
my
where you were going with
gosh.
this. I was like, so you know he doesn't, but you probably don't know he doesn't know. I mean,
and I I felt,
crazy.
I mean, like
Well, you
years
had
later,
no
I mean, like I was,
idea.
yeah. So I mean, and he ended up beating me up on the playground. But uh, he was then removed from that school, and I didn't see him again until I was 19. So
Oh my
it
gosh.
it's just, you got to have some level of honesty, because if you don't have that honesty, one day there's going to be resentment. And
Yes.
so
It's gonna
Yeah.
backfire.
just yeah.
Avoiding
So
what
that's
you
my first experience
interpret.
with adoption.
Yeah, no, I think avoiding what you interpret as difficult conversations because you yourself feel uncomfortable about it or don't understand and therefore assume that's how the child will feel too. I mean, you are enlisting every single person in their life to lie to them also. You think you can control the narrative and you absolutely can't because all these other people know. So,
It'll become really
Hmm.
uncomfortable later.
yeah, I mean, it's not going to go well regardless, but if
Right.
you find out accidentally, it'll be even worse. And
Yeah.
none of that is your fault. You're just so innocent in
No.
this, but
Yeah.
it's so common. It's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. Are you and your brother close now? I'm like, let's unpack your family.
No, it's we did get close for a little while, but we are just two very, very, very different people. So
Yeah.
yeah, we don't align. No hard feelings. No, just we just chose different paths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
So I want to talk about your book that you wrote that we still send
Yeah, I was like,
to
if you're gonna be embarrassed
families.
about this, you're about to find out that every single one of our families gets this book.
I am so
We obviously
touched by
loved it.
that.
We loved it so much, and it's called Love Without Wings. Oh, let me get it in the camera actually. That's probably helpful.
Amanda's name is on the back, so she also loves this book.
I mean, what I tell you, I'm basically a star now. This is my claim to fame
I thought this was your claim to
right
fame.
here. Well, this was before that. This is what I told
This is a
Adam.
stepping stone to
Yeah,
fame.
this is why I'm on a podcast now, all because I'm listed on the back of this book.
Well, I mean, I wanted your perspective because, after I wrote it, I'm like, okay, well, this is just like this is our story. This is how we feel. And if I want other families to read it, I want to know that, that's why I got it. I sent it to a child's psychologist. That's why I sent it to you. That's why to other people in the adoption community, because I never wanted to put out there something that couldn't serve as a tool.
Hmm.
And that was what was really important to me about writing the book. I wrote it for my son Taryn. It started off as a bedtime story that I was making up as I would rock him. And I mean, like, he was young. He was like, he was like 4 or 5 months old when I started like making up the story, like feeding him a bottle, and just that's how I would get him to sleep. I'd rock him, and I'd just recite the story, and every night it would change a little bit. And finally, I finally felt like I got the rhythm of the story and what I wanted it to be. So I brought my phone, put it on the nightstand, and I recorded myself. And then from there, I was able to, go through the developmental edit and everything. But I created it because like I've said probably 10 times on here already that I always wanted him to know his own story and where he came from. And I thought this could be a way to kind of explain adoption in a magical way without getting like too caught up in the details. Like the word adoption is never said once in the book. It's really the story of how a family comes to be.
Oh my gosh, that's what I always say to everybody. I'm like, you're telling them the story of how they became a family, not you're adopted. Like it's not the same
Well, that
conversation.
that was my problem. So when I filled Taryn's nursery up with books probably 2 weeks before he was born. That's when I finally was starting to let myself nest a little.
Yeah.
So I had the nursery together. I was putting all these books in there. And one of the things that I found really impossible to find were books on adoption that approached it from like a storytelling way. A lot of it is that I found, and there's absolutely a place for this. I think it's very important. There were a lot of books on the pride of adoption, and a little bit about the mechanics. Like that I think is incredibly important. But I'm a producer, I'm a storyteller, and I couldn't find anything that had like this just like narrative and magical flow that could just introduce the subject in a very, um, I don't want to say juvenile way because that's not the word, but in a way that kids can kind of relate to through
Yeah.
story. Because like Taryn's always telling us stories, he's always coming up with stuff. I started recording him. He's a very creative little kid, but I wanted it to also be a bonding experience. Like obviously, like kids Taryn's age aren't going to be able to read a book like that themselves, but it's an opportunity for a child, and whether it's their parent or caregiver, to start a discussion. And when I started telling that story to Taryn, I started reading him that book. Now that he's 4 years old, and he's starting to ask questions. Like I think he said to me the other day, he's like, do I have a mommy? I'm like, no, buddy, you have a birth mommy. And I related it to him, like, that book, the fairy? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's Marty. You grew in her belly. So it's just like in the story. You grew in somebody else's belly, and she made this choice so that she picked us to be your daddy. So I'm like, and that's how that worked. And he related to that without going into everything, all the daddy meltdowns. So to me, it served its purpose. And the fact that Lifelong shares that book with all the families, it just really, I can't tell you how much that just touches me. That is my measure of success. I don't care whether it becomes like, and I would never expect it to become like a New York Times bestseller or win awards or anything like that. But the
Oprah's
fact that
book
the
list.
message, but the fact that the message does get out there with its intended audience is what's really important to me, because it really creates this opportunity for the caregiver and the child to connect and start that conversation.
Well, and we've had families reach out and talk about how much they love the book and how they read it to their child, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Adam would love that. So I think it's just really special.
Well, I'll tell you something else that's actually kind of interesting, and this was not the intention behind it whatsoever. But I told you before we got started, where I'm starting my PhD in December at the University of Aberdeen, and what I'm pursuing is actually, I won't get into the weeds of it, but it's film and visual culture and storytelling. But my focus is really going to be on something called contact theory and parasocial relationships. Contact theory, the idea if you've never met someone from a certain group,
Hmm.
that by meeting somebody from that group, you get a greater understanding of them, and it breaks down stereotypes and biases. So that's contact theory. Parasocial relationships is the idea that these relationships don't have to be real; they can be imagined through books, film, television. Because then you bring these people into your homes, and you get to feel like I can watch 6 Feet Under or Schitt's Creek, and I'm still like I feel connected to these characters. Like David Rose is my best friend, but
Same.
for what that does is with this book in particular, like it doesn't make a spectacle out of it having two dads, because I mean it's very obvious like looking at it that it's got two dads, but it's actually become one of those tools. I had someone who reached out to me recently who said that she had shared that book with somebody who did not approve of a two dad family. And she's like, I want you to take this book and I want you to read it. And I guess that friend reached back out to her, and it moved the needle on her perspective. And she still doesn't quite understand it, but she's like, okay, I get it. You know what? As long as a child is loved It shouldn't matter whether it's two dads, two moms, mom and a dad, just a mom, any which way that you can think of a family structure. So it actually now kind of actually is working into my PhD thesis that, yeah, this is actually through that book is actually able to like move the needle on someone's perspective. And, I think that that's really important.
It is really important. And we're a completely non-discrimination company. I think that's really awesome. I think anytime you're exposing anyone to anything they're not familiar with or encountering in their daily life is going to have an impact on some level, even if it's, a lot of micro impacts, I think it still counts.
It does.
And matters. And at some point, maybe even changes.
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, and that's the hope. Like my whole idea is that, specifically with like LGBTQ representation, that film, television, and books are kind of the reason that we've come so far in just a few years, and
Yeah.
like social attitudes. So
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of times when you're trying for education about groups that can be very discriminated against, I have a son with Down syndrome, and I always feel like I don't have the luxury of also being reactive about
mhm,
other people's opinions, because I feel like with education, if you're not if you're not calm and patient, no one's going to listen to you. So, you have to
mhm.
do it either in creative ways or different outlets that kind of just are showcasing it more, or immersing them more, or exposing them more.
Yeah.
So I
And
hope that everything
I
goes
think that's
well in Aberdeen. I think that's really cool and interesting.
thanks. I can't wait. But I mean, just to kind of like circle back to close that out, thank you, Amanda, and you and Lifelong for sharing that book, because that is just what gives me so much pride in having written it. So,
I mean, it should. It's a great book. I used to read it to my kids. Now they don't want me to read to them at bedtime because they're, preteens and high schoolers. But
do you have the version of the book? So I don't, I think I told you about this. So in the back of new prints, there's a QR code that if you scan it, it actually opens up like a video book where it's being narrated by this lovely
yeah,
British woman. And it's got like almost like paper doll animation. So because I know as a parent, like there are times Taryn will bring me a book. I'm like, buddy, I'm cooking dinner. I can't read. I can't do that right now. I will right after. But now it's like a child has the tool. If they want to read the story or hear the story, they can literally just open it up on like their iPad or phone,
That's
I
awesome.
and
love
have the
Everyone has
that.
story read to
tablets
them.
now anyway, so
I don't
Yeah.
have that version because I have one of the originals that you signed. It's up on one of my shelves in my house. So it's so I don't think I have the one, but I do remember you telling me that about the QR code, and I think that that's neat. I wonder if
Yeah.
our books that we give out now, because I know we got a
I
new shipment
hmm
recently. So
Yeah, that was them. They all have the QR codes in the back.
oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
yeah, that's really cool.
That's really cool. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on and telling your story. I've always thought your story was so unique and you have great advice. So thank you so much for carving time out to be on the podcast.
Oh no, I appreciate it. And anytime I have an excuse to talk to you guys, I I love that, not only do we still have a relationship with our birth mother, but we still have a relationship with Lifelong, which I think is
Yeah,
really important too.
I love chatting with you. I love the picture that you just sent too. I'm like, look at this cute family.
Yeah, yeah. So that was Marty. She came out
Yep,
for I think it was like 6 days a few weeks ago, and it was wonderful. It was so good to see her.
that's awesome. What does she think about you moving to Scotland?
Oh, she's ready to come visit. She's so
Oh, I
excited.
was I was gonna say, whenever somebody moves, it's always sad, right? Because they're not as close or accessible. But then at the same time, you're like, well, now I have a new place to visit.
Well, and what I love to tell people, so this where we bought our house, it's in this little town called Stonehaven that's like right outside Aberdeen. And it's got like this really beautiful dramatic coastline with this old ruined castle just sitting on the cliffs. And there's like 10 castles within 30 minutes of us. So I'm like, this is just going to be such a magical experience for the kids
Oh my
too.
gosh.
Like I
Yes.
can't wait to like start making new stories with them, and like it'll be a lot of fun.
It
So
sounds
it's a really cool place to like try to entice people to visit, because I haven't been able to get people to visit us here in San Jose, which is fine. I
I
don't
think
like.
they will in Scotland though. I just have a
I
feeling.
feel like plane tickets cost the same to fly to Scotland as they do to fly to California half the time. So my family's in
Probably.
California, and it's always like $400 or
It's
so.
always pretty
Yeah, it's
expensive.
always
Yeah.
expensive. I love Scotland though. I'm super jealous.
Wow.
Yeah, I've never been. Maybe I'll come out and visit. You've enticed me.
Oh, please do. Please do.
He's like, no, I didn't mean that.
No, I absolutely
We'll all
do. I
show
want
up with your book.
absolutely want anyone who wants to come visit. We have an open door policy.
The townspeople of Scotland don't even know that you're a published author, probably, so we'll have to make that known.
Yeah.
We'll show up just handing out books in the town square.
I would.
I know. Oh, that's so cool, though. They're going to have such a
You're
neat
making me
experience.
blush.
Yeah, you have to send me all the pictures, all the updates
Oh, I
once you get there.
absolutely
'Cause
will.
you said November is when you'll actually be there, right?
Yeah, we land on November 3rd. So,
That's coming
Aw,
up. That's
that's
not
my
that far
mom's
away.
birthday.
really? We already own a house over there. We bought our house we went over for my 40th birthday in May, and I'm like, well, we decided then and there that this is where we want to be. And so I flew back 2 weeks later and I went house hunting for 3 days.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So cool.
What an experience. I've always wondered what it would be like to purchase a home in another country. Was it very different from purchasing a home?
So different. So I don't know if it's just the way that we purchased, but I used to work in real estate.
Me
In
too.
another life. And what was the most interesting thing is from the offer to closing, Kevin and I didn't sign a single document. Not
I've
one.
heard that. I've heard that. I didn't
It
know if it was
was
real or not.
no, didn't sign a single thing.
That's so weird.
Just a little
We made
handshake
an
agreement.
we made an oral offer to the people who we purchased from, which also over there everything is handled through solicitors, but 90% of the times it's the current property owners who are showing you the house, not a
Yeah.
real estate agent.
Yeah. It's just like Under the Tuscan Sun.
So we made an oral offer. We got with a solicitor, and they handled everything from there. I was emailing them like 3 days before the closing. I'm like, "Are you sure there's nothing for us to sign? Like, this is not normal for me. Like, I'm used to like signing a stack of paperwork." And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's so
it's the
It's
most
so
interesting
easy. That's
thing.
so cool.
Yeah,
I know. We should all buy
but
houses.
Honestly. Well, now that I know it's so easy.
I know. I'll just figure out a way to pay for it before closing.
Right. We'll figure it out. Well,
Aw.
thank you again, Adam. It was really nice to have you on. Please stay in touch. Please.
oh,
Good luck on your
thank you
PhD.
both.
Yeah, good
Oh,
luck on
thank
the
you.
PhD. Give Kevin, Taryn, Ronan, everyone our best.
All right, I will do. And Kevin did send his best. He wanted to make sure that I told you that, and
Oh.
hopefully look forward to connecting again.
Hi, Adam.
Bye.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for listening to Adam's story. And thank you again to Adam for sharing his story and hanging out with us.
Yes. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Go buy the book. Love Without Wings.
Or adopt with us and we'll send it to you for free.
Oh, yeah. Or
Yes,
that.
I don't know.
Or that.
But yeah, no, it is a really great book, and I'm glad we had a chance to really showcase it. And hopefully, we'll have some more stories for you soon. I know we're going to be speaking to some more of our families.
Yeah, we're super
in the future.
excited. We have a lot of guests coming up, and
Yeah.
all of them have different stories and
Some
different
single
families.
moms, which I'm
Yeah.
really excited about. So that should be really cool. So hopefully, we'll have more for you soon. So join us next time.
Bye.